Maya Bennett had mastered the art of being underestimated long before she joined the elite training program at Fort Carson. At 29, she moved through the training area with quiet confidence. She was always watching and always learning. The men around her had placed bets on how quickly she would fail. They spent their time comparing war stories and showing off their physical strength. They never noticed how she studied their methods, found their weak points, or practiced alone when everyone else had gone to sleep. The morning meeting room was filled with the usual energy. Captain Derek Matthews walked around the display board, using big gestures as he explained the day's training plans. Sergeant Jason Reynolds leaned back in his chair, telling stories about his last mission to the men who listened closely. Private Leo Harris cleaned his weapon with careful precision, sometimes looking at Maya with doubt. Today's training will test how well you perform under pressure, Captain Matthews announced, not looking at Maya as he spoke. You will face fake enemy fire, go without sleep, and handle challenges that will push you to your limits. Sir, Maya said, raising her hand with confidence, I have prepared some notes on other ways to approach the hill scenario based on similar land in Afghanistan. The room went quiet before Captain Matthews cleared his throat. Thank you, Bennett. I am sure your view is valuable, but we will stick with proven methods from those with real battle experience. This dismissal hurt, but Maya was used to it. She had been at Fort Carson for almost 3 months, and the routine never changed. She watched, she learned, she offered ideas, and they ignored everything she said. To them, she was just a woman who had somehow gotten into the selection process and who would surely break when the training got harder. What they did not know was that the quiet woman with the perfect posture had once been the youngest member of the Army's most elite scout unit. The small metal box hidden under her bed contained medals earned during 4 years of dangerous missions. She had completed 37 high-risk operations across 2 deployments, each one done with perfect skill that had saved many American lives. But that was before the disaster, before the helicopter crash that killed half her team, before the 18-hour battle that left her with 3 bullet wounds and bad dreams that still woke her screaming most nights. Before she asked to be moved to training duty, where her skills could help the next group of soldiers without putting her back in the battle zones that haunted her dreams. During afternoon planning meetings, when Matthews suggested basic attack patterns for the training scenarios, Maya would quietly draw other approaches in her notebook. Routes that gave better cover, higher ground, unexpected angles of attack. These were strategies that had kept her alive in situations where standard methods would have gotten everyone killed. She tried sharing these ideas once during her 2nd week at Carson. Sir, if I may suggest, she had begun, standing with her hand-drawn map, this hill approach offers better cover and more escape options if... Bennett, Matthews had cut her off, his voice full of disrespect. Your job is to help with training setup, not planning. Leave the battle plans to those of us who understand real combat. The room had filled with barely hidden laughter. Reynolds had made a joke about promoting her to general. Harris had suggested maybe she could plan their lunch menu instead. Maya had simply nodded, returned to her notebook, and never spoke up in planning meetings again. But she never stopped preparing. Every morning, while the other trainers were still asleep, Maya ran the most challenging path on the base, a rocky 5-mile course the soldiers had nicknamed Heartbreak Ridge, while others complained about the required 3-mile morning runs. Maya pushed herself through 15 miles of rough terrain, her muscles remembering what it felt like to carry a heavy pack through mountain passes while avoiding enemy patrols. She memorized every ridge, every valley, every possible ambush point within the training area. Her official training manual contained the required course outlines and exercise details, but between those pages she kept detailed notes on land features, weather patterns, and battle improvements that could save lives if anyone bothered to read them. When Private Harris asked why she always carried extra medical supplies during field exercises, she simply said, better to have and not need. When Sergeant Reynolds wondered why she never joined their evening card games, she explained. She preferred reviewing training plans. Nobody asked more questions. Nobody was curious enough to look deeper. They saw what they expected to see, a woman trying to prove herself in a man's world, sure to fail when the pressure became too intense. They never noticed how her eyes constantly scanned the area during mess hall conversations. They never saw how she always found places to hide or take cover wherever she went. They never realized that the woman they dismissed as just another diversity hire was actually one of the most decorated specialists in the regiment's history. In the dining hall, trainers would joke about her seriousness. "Look at Bennett," Matthews would laugh, studying those manuals like they hold the secrets of the universe. They had no idea she was memorizing every detail, planning for backup plans, preparing for scenarios the training program never covered, but that she had faced in real battle. The base's information network was limited, but when she could access it, Maya would read reports that painted a troubling picture. Terrorist activity was increasing in regions where American forces operated. Advanced weapons were appearing in conflict zones, and training programs were not adapting quickly enough to prepare soldiers for these new threats. She had filed 3 separate suggestions for updating the training scenarios to reflect these new battle realities. These included bullets that could go through traditional cover, drone surveillance that eliminated the element of surprise, and communication blocking that isolated units in critical moments. All 3 reports had been filed without response. She had found them in the trash bin outside Matthew's office 2 days later. But Maya kept watching, kept recording, kept preparing. Because somewhere in the back of her mind, in the part of her brain that had kept her alive through 4 years of impossible missions, she had the growing certainty that the training program was failing to prepare soldiers for what they would actually face in the field. And when that moment came, when the training exercises stopped and real lives hung in the balance, she would be ready. The question was whether anyone would finally be willing to listen. The radio came to life at 0547 hours, breaking the early morning quiet of Fort Carson's northern training grounds. Maya was already on Heartbreak Ridge, her morning run completed, as she watched the sunrise color the landscape in shades of gold and amber. The panicked voice of Lieutenant Greg Parker cut through the static like a knife. "Base, this is exercise control. We have a real-world situation. Repeat, this is not an exercise. We have a training group trapped by actual enemy fire. At grid reference Charlie 6, multiple casualties reported." The base erupted into controlled chaos. Maya watched through her binoculars as soldiers poured from the barracks, grabbing gear and shouting orders. But she kept her focus on the distant ridge, scanning carefully for any sign of the shooters' positions. There, a flash of movement about 800 meters northeast of the training group's last known position. The clear sign of multiple armed individuals moving with military discipline, not the random hunters or hikers that occasionally wandered onto the base's outer area. She grabbed her radio. "Base, this is Bennett. I have possible enemy movement. Grid reference 41, Alpha Tango 23,657 45,821, range about." "Bennett, get off the command frequency." Captain Matthews' voice cut through her transmission. "This is a real-world tactical situation. Report to your station for roll call." Maya released the transmit button, her jaw tightening as she watched more movement along the ridge. These were not random trespassers. Their movement patterns showed military training, disciplined, coordinated, using land features for hiding, while maintaining visual contact with the training group's position. She opened her notebook and began recording everything: time, positions, movement patterns, estimated numbers, weapons visible through her binoculars. By the time the base emergency response team assembled 30 minutes later, Maya had filled 3 pages with detailed observations. Through her binoculars, she could see the training group 30 young soldiers on their final exercise before graduation pinned down in a shallow ravine that offered minimal cover. The attackers had positioned themselves on higher ground with clear fields of fire, cutting off all escape routes. Standard military doctrine for an ambush. She knocked on Matthew's office door at 07:00 hours sharp after the emergency response. Team had deployed toward the ambush site. "Sir, I have intelligence on the hostile force engaging our training group," she began, holding her notebook. Matthews looked up from his tactical display with barely concealed irritation. "Bennett, we have actual combat personnel handling this situation. Your job is to account for all non-deployed personnel." "Sir, I observed the attackers' positions during the initial contact. I've documented their movement patterns, equipment, signatures, and probable." "That's enough, Bennett," Matthews snapped. "You're a training assistant, not a tactical analyst. Return to your station and follow the emergency protocols." Maya stood at attention for a moment longer than necessary, her eyes meeting Matthews with quiet intensity. "Understood, sir." "Will that be all?" "Dismissed." She left her report on his desk anyway. 2 hours later, the situation had deteriorated significantly. The emergency response team had been unable to reach the pinned-down trainees, themselves taking fire whenever they attempted to advance. The base commander had requested helicopter support, but the nearest available units were at least 90 minutes away. Private Carlos Mendez from the communications section approached Maya during the emergency briefing, his face pale, hands shaking slightly as he set his tablet down across from hers. "Staff Sergeant," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "Can I ask you something?" Maya looked up from her tactical display, where she had been tracking the reported positions of both the response team and the hostile force. Mendez was barely 20, fresh from basic training, still had that eager-to-please demeanor that combat experience hadn't yet worn away. "What's on your mind, Mendez?" "It's about the situation," he whispered. "The guys on the emergency team are saying they can't advance because of the terrain and hostile positions. They're estimating at least 12 hostiles with superior weapons and tactical training." Maya waited. "One of the team members reported the hostiles are using coordinated fire and movement techniques, professional stuff, not random hunters or local militia," Mendez continued. "That doesn't make sense out here, does it, Staff Sergeant?" "What makes you think that?" Maya asked carefully. "My brother served in Syria," Mendez said. "He told me stories about encountering mercenaries and special forces from other countries. This sounds like one of those stories." He leaned closer. "Staff Sergeant, you're always taking notes, always watching everything. Have you seen anything that might help us understand who we're dealing with?" Maya glanced toward the command table where Matthews was arguing with the base commander about extraction options. Neither man seemed to be considering the possibility that this was a coordinated attack by professional operators. "Mendez," she said quietly, "if I were you, I'd make sure the communications team is prepared for possible jamming attempts. These don't sound like random trespassers." "Yes, Staff Sergeant, but what about the trainees? They're just kids, most of them. First real deployment for almost all of them. They're not prepared for this." Maya looked at the young soldiers' earnest face and made a decision that would change everything. "Meet me at equipment storage in 15 minutes. Bring your security clearance card." At 0945 hours, Mendez arrived at the equipment storage facility where Maya was waiting with her notebook and a set of keys she wasn't supposed to have. "Staff Sergeant, should we be in here?" Mendez asked nervously as Maya unlocked a secure storage room that housed specialized equipment. "What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room," Maya said. "Understood, Staff Sergeant." She opened her notebook to the pages documenting the hostile force, spreading them across a workbench. Mendez's eyes widened as he saw the detailed diagrams, movement patterns, and tactical analysis she'd recorded during the initial contact. "This is incredible," he breathed. "This is professional intelligence work. Why isn't this being used in the response planning?" "It was submitted." "It was ignored," Maya replied, turning to earlier pages showing weeks of notes about security vulnerabilities in the training area. "I've been documenting weaknesses in our perimeter security for months. The northern ridge has minimal surveillance, predictable patrol patterns, and terrain features that favor infiltration by small tactical teams." Mendez studied the diagrams by flashlight. "Staff Sergeant, where did you learn to do analysis like this?" Maya was quiet for a long moment, accessing the secure cabinet with her key. "Previous assignment. Different unit. Were you intelligence?" Another pause. "Something like that." Maya removed a hard-shell case from the cabinet and opened it, revealing a customized M110 semi-automatic sniper system with advanced optics and specialized ammunition. "Staff Sergeant, this is restricted equipment," Mendez said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, it is," Maya agreed, quickly assembling the weapon with practiced hands that betrayed years of experience. "And right now, it's the only thing that might save 30 young soldiers from being killed by professional hostiles that our response team can't reach." Mendez watched in stunned silence as Maya efficiently prepared the rifle, checked the scope, calibration, and loaded specialized ammunition. "Staff Sergeant Bennett," he finally asked, "who are you really?" Maya secured the rifle and looked at the young communications specialist with eyes that had seen too much combat, too many good. Soldiers die because of poor planning and rigid adherence to protocols that didn't match battlefield realities. "Right now, I'm the only chance those trainees have," she said simply. "I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Staff Sergeant." "I need you to create a communication disruption, just enough to keep the command team occupied for 30 minutes. Then I need you to make sure this equipment case finds its way back to this storage room by tomorrow morning." "What are you going to do?" Maya shouldered the rifle and moved toward the door. "I'm going to take a shot that nobody else on this base can make." As Maya disappeared into the morning light, Mendez realized he was watching someone who understood war at a level that transcended rank and training manuals. Someone who moved with a quiet confidence that came only from having faced death so many times that it had become just another calculation in the mathematics of survival. Maya moved with practiced stealth through the rocky terrain of Fort Carson's northern boundary. Years of long-range reconnaissance missions had taught her how to become one with the landscape, a shadow moving between shadows, indistinguishable from the natural flow of the environment. The M110 sniper rifle felt familiar against her shoulder, like greeting an old friend she'd tried to forget. The morning sun cast long shadows across the valley as she made her way toward a rocky outcropping that offered both concealment and a clear line of sight to the ambush location. According to her calculations, the position would provide her with approximately 1,100 meters of visibility across the primary engagement zone, well within the effective range of the weapon she carried, but challenging enough that no one without exceptional training would attempt such a shot. Back at the command center, Captain Matthews was growing increasingly frustrated as the tactical situation deteriorated. The emergency response team had been forced to take cover behind a ridgeline 400 meters from the trainees' position, unable to advance due to precise enemy fire that seemed to anticipate their every move. "What do you mean you can't establish radio contact?" Matthews demanded, glaring at the communications officer. "We had clear transmission 10 minutes ago." "Sir, we're experiencing intermittent interference across multiple frequencies," the officer explained, not realizing that Private Mendez had carefully engineered the communications disruption exactly as Maya had requested. "Tech team is working to resolve it now. We have 30 trainees pinned down with reported casualties, an emergency response team that can't advance, and now we can't even communicate properly." Matthews slammed his fist on the tactical display. "Where's the helicopter support? Still 45 minutes out, sir." Matthews stared at the tactical display, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. 30 young soldiers, his responsibility, might not survive the next hour if something didn't change dramatically. His eyes fell on Maya's notebook, still sitting where she'd left it on his desk. With reluctant curiosity, he opened it to find page after page of detailed terrain analysis, tactical observations, and security recommendations that he'd been ignoring for months. The precision of the work was undeniable professional grade. Intelligence gathering that went far beyond what anyone would expect from a training assistant. "Get me Bennett," he ordered, a new urgency in his voice. "Sir, Staff Sergeant Bennett isn't at her station," a junior officer reported. "No one has seen her since the emergency briefing." A cold realization began to form in Matthew's mind as he continued turning pages in Maya's notebook, finding detailed notes on sniper craft, ballistic calculations, and long-range marksmanship techniques that only someone with extensive special operations experience would know. Who is she? He whispered to himself. Who is Bennett really? Meanwhile, Maya had reached her chosen position, a natural depression in the rocks that offered both cover from enemy observation and a stable firing platform. She settled into place, arranging her equipment with methodical precision. Range, finder, wind gauge, tactical spotting scope tools of a trade she'd hoped to leave behind. Through her scope, she could see the full tactical situation with clarity that the command center's drones couldn't provide. The training group was pinned down in a shallow ravine approximately 1,100 meters from her position. They had established a hasty defensive perimeter, but their position offered minimal cover from the elevated firing positions the hostiles had secured. She could see 3 wounded soldiers being treated by their comrades in the center of the formation, young men and women who had signed up to serve their country and now faced death during what should have been a routine training exercise. The rest of the trainees were returning fire when possible, but their ammunition was clearly limited, and their position was deteriorating by the minute. The hostiles Maya counted 14 distinct individuals had established 3 separate firing positions with interlocking fields of fire that covered all potential escape routes from the trainees' position. Their weapons appeared to be military grade, possibly including specialized marksman rifles based on the precision of their fire and effective range. Most concerning was their tactical discipline. These weren't random criminals or local militia. Their positioning, fire discipline, and coordinated movement all suggested professional military training special forces or elite mercenaries, executing a carefully planned operation. Maya opened her range card and began making calculations. Distance, 1,100 meters to the primary hostile position. Wind, variable 5 to 8 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity, low. Barometric pressure, 30/12 nhg. All factors that would affect bullet trajectory and required precise compensation. She made minute adjustments to her scope, accounting for elevation, wind drift, and the Coriolis effect. The mathematics of long range. Marksmanship had always come naturally to her, a perfect fusion of physics, environmental awareness, and intuitive understanding of how a bullet travels through space and time. As she prepared for the shot that might save 30 lives, Maya's mind drifted briefly to Mosul, to the helicopter crash that had killed half her reconnaissance team, to the 18-hour firefight that followed as she and the survivors had held off waves of enemy fighters until extraction arrived, to the 3 bullet wounds she'd sustained while providing covering fire so the wounded could be evacuated. She still carried the physical scars across her abdomen and shoulder, but the deeper wounds, the ones that woke her screaming in the night, were invisible. The weight of command decisions, the burden of watching good soldiers die, the knowledge that sometimes survival came down to a single perfect shot that only she could make. Maya pushed those memories aside. The past was immutable. The present 30 young soldiers facing death was what mattered now. Through her scope, she identified what appeared to be the hostile forces commander, a figure in the central position, who was directing the others with hand signals and occasional radio communication. He was partially concealed behind a rock formation, presenting a difficult target at this range, but Maya could see enough of his upper body to calculate a shot. If she eliminated him, the coordinated assault would likely falter, creating an opportunity for the trainees to reach better defensive positions, or potentially even break contact and retreat to safer ground. The shot would be at the extreme edge of conventional marksmanship, 1,100 meters, with variable wind conditions against a partially concealed target. The kind of shot that appeared in military legends, but rarely in actual combat reports because few people on Earth could make it reliably. Maya controlled her breathing, finding the natural respiratory pause that elite snipers use to steady their aim. Her heart rate slowed as years of training took over. The world narrowed to a single point of focus, the precise spot where her bullet needed to impact and neutralize the threat. At the command center, Matthews was growing increasingly desperate as the situation deteriorated further. The emergency response team reported being pinned down by precision fire any time they attempted to maneuver. The trainees had reported, too, more casualties in the last 15 minutes, and the helicopter support was still 30 minutes away. "Sir," Private Mendez approached tentatively, "I think there's something you should know about Staff Sergeant Bennett." Matthews looked up from the tactical display, his expression a mixture of frustration and dawning realization. "What about Bennett?" "Sir, I believe she may have been," the radio crackled suddenly, cutting through the static that had been plaguing communications. "Command, this is Training Group Alpha. Something's happening. The hostiles are. They're in disarray. Their center position has gone silent." Matthews grabbed the radio. "Alpha, clarify your last transmission." "Sir, someone just took out what appeared to be their commander. Perfect shot from nowhere. The rest are scrambling for cover, breaking their fire discipline." A second transmission cut in from the emergency response team. "Command, hostile fire has decreased significantly. We're observing disorganized movement among the remaining hostiles. Request permission to advance toward the trainee's position." "Permission granted," Matthews responded immediately, then turned to Mendez. "What were you saying about Bennett?" Mendez hesitated, then gestured toward Maya's notebook. "Sir, you might want to check page 47. Matthews flipped to the indicated page and found a detailed service record that Bennett had sketched from memory. 75th Ranger Regiment, followed by assignment to a classified long-range reconnaissance unit, 4 years of operations in some of the most dangerous regions on Earth, 13 confirmed high-value target eliminations at ranges exceeding 800 meters, a distinguished service cross for actions during the Mosul extraction." "My God," Matthews whispered. She was LRRP. Long-Range Reconnaissance Patrol, the Army's elite scouts who operated deep behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and eliminating high-value targets with surgical precision. Soldiers whose names rarely appeared in official reports, but whose actions often changed the course of entire operations. "Where is she now?" Matthews demanded. "I believe she's doing what she was trained to do, sir," Mendez replied quietly. On the northern ridge, Maya observed the immediate effect of her shot. Through her scope, the hostile forces' command structure had collapsed instantly, with the remaining operators scrambling for better cover and losing the coordinated fire discipline that had pinned down the trainees. This was her window of opportunity. With mechanical precision, she identified the second in command who was attempting to rally the others and squeezed the trigger again. The rifle bucked against her shoulder as the second hostile dropped, creating even more confusion among the remaining forces. Her third shot eliminated their communication specialist, recognizable by his equipment and position slightly behind the main element. Without leadership or communication, the remaining hostiles began withdrawing from their exposed positions, allowing the emergency response team to finally advance toward the trainees. Maya continued providing precision fire support as the situation evolved, eliminating 2 more hostiles who attempted to establish new firing positions. Each shot was a calculated decision: mathematics, physics, and the weight of responsibility, distilled into a single moment of perfect focus. By the time the helicopter support arrived 30 minutes later, the hostile force had completely withdrawn, leaving behind equipment and 2 casualties that would provide valuable intelligence about who they were and why they had targeted an American military training facility. Maya disassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, carefully wiping down each component to remove any traces of her presence. The weapon and equipment would find their way back to the secure storage room through Mendez's assistance, and no official record would ever show that they had been removed during the crisis. As she made her way back toward the base, moving carefully to avoid being seen, Maya reflected on what she had just done. After years of trying to escape her past, she had embraced it fully when lives depended on her unique skills. The familiar weight of the rifle, the calculations, the controlled breathing, it had all come back as naturally as breathing. For the first time since Mosul, she had used her abilities without hesitation or doubt. And 30 young soldiers would go home to their families because of it. By the time Maya walked through the main gate of Fort Carson 4 hours later, the base was in a state of controlled frenzy. Military police had established additional checkpoints. Intelligence officers were interviewing the trainees who had been rescued. Medical personnel were treating the wounded. And Captain Matthews was standing at the entrance to the command center, watching her approach with new eyes. "Staff Sergeant Bennett," he said formally, "where have you been?" Maya stood at attention, her face revealing nothing. "Securing the northern perimeter as per emergency protocols, sir." Matthews studied her for a long moment. "Interesting. Because we have reports of precision sniper fire eliminating 5 hostile combatants during today's incident. Fire that came from the exact ridgeline you documented in your security observations." He held up her notebook. "Fire that would have required exceptional skill at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Maya remained silent, her eyes meeting his without flinching. "The emergency response team commander estimates that without that supporting fire, we would have lost most if not all of those 30 trainees before helicopter support arrived." Still Maya said nothing. "Follow me, Staff Sergeant," Matthews ordered, turning toward his office. Inside, with the door closed, Matthews' demeanor changed completely. "I know what you did," he said quietly. "And I know who you are, or at least who you were." He placed her notebook on the desk between them, open to the page with her service record. "Long-range reconnaissance. Distinguished Service Cross. 13 confirmed eliminations. The Mosul extraction." Maya remained at parade rest, her face impassive. "What I don't understand," Matthews continued, "is why one of the most decorated Special Operations soldiers in recent history is working as a training assistant at Fort Carson while hiding her background and expertise." "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Granted." "Some experiences change you," Maya said simply. "After Mosul, after watching half my team die while extracting a high-value intelligence asset, I needed distance from combat operations, from making life-and-death decisions. So you requested reassignment to training duty?" "Yes, sir." "Where I could still contribute without returning to active operations." Matthews leaned back in his chair, studying her with new respect. "And yet, today, when those trainees were in danger, you didn't hesitate to do exactly what you'd been trying to avoid." "They were soldiers under my care, sir." The calculation was simple. 5 precision shots at over 1,000 meters in variable wind conditions isn't simple, Bennett. It's exceptional. It's the kind of skill that saves lives in situations where nothing else can. Maya was quiet for a moment. What happens now, sir? Matthews closed the notebook. Officially? Nothing. The after-action report will credit the emergency response team and timely helicopter support for resolving the situation. Your involvement won't be mentioned. Relief flickered briefly across Maya's face. Unofficially? Matthews continued. Everything changes. Because I now understand that I've been ignoring the expertise of someone who could substantially improve how we prepare the next generation of soldiers for what they'll actually face in combat. He stood and extended his hand. Staff Sergeant Bennett, I'd like to formally request your assistance in redesigning our tactical training protocols, with a particular focus on advanced reconnaissance techniques and counter-ambush procedures. Maya hesitated, then took his hand. On one condition, sir. Name it. We implement the security improvements I've been recommending for the past 3 months. Today's incident was preventable. Matthews nodded slowly. Consider it done. As Maya left the command center, she found Private Mendez waiting nervously by the door. Staff Sergeant, he said quietly, the equipment has been returned. No one will ever know. Thank you, Mendez. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he'd watched her disappear with a sniper rifle that morning. Was it true? What I found in your file? Mosul? Maya looked at the young soldier, seeing in him the same earnest dedication she'd once had, before experience had taught her the true cost of war. Some stories aren't meant to be shared, Mendez. But what matters is that 30 soldiers are going home to their families tonight. As she walked away, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since before Mosul, a sense of purpose that went beyond simply existing from one day to the next. For years, she had been running from who she was, from the skills that defined her, from the responsibility that came with exceptional ability. Today had proven what she had secretly always known. Sometimes the very things we try to escape are what make us most valuable when it matters most. The question was whether she was finally ready to accept that truth and all its implications. The answer was already forming in her mind as she walked toward the barracks, where 30 young soldiers were alive because she had finally stopped running from who she really was. 3 days after the incident that was now being referred to as the Northern Ridge engagement, Fort Carson remained on elevated security alert. Intelligence officers had identified the hostile force as a well-funded mercenary unit with connections to international terrorist organizations. Their target appeared to have been the training group itself specifically, 3 trainees who were scheduled for deployment to a classified operation following their graduation. Maya found herself in an unexpected new role. Captain Matthews had assigned her to lead a comprehensive review of the base's security protocols and training methodologies. For the first time since arriving at Fort Carson, her expertise was not only acknowledged but actively sought after. The morning briefing room had a different energy now. When Maya spoke, people listened. When she made recommendations, they were implemented without question. The change was subtle but unmistakable, respect replacing skepticism, trust replacing dismissal. Based on the intelligence gathered from the captured equipment, Maya explained to the assembled training staff, pointing to her detailed analysis on the tactical display. We're facing adversaries with significantly more advanced training than our current scenarios account for. These weren't random militants with basic weapons. These were professional operators with specialized equipment and tactical discipline. Captain Matthews nodded in agreement. Staff Sergeant Bennett has prepared updated training protocols that address these emerging threats. Effective immediately, all training scenarios will incorporate her recommendations. After the briefing, Staff Sergeant Reynolds approached Maya as she gathered her materials. "Bennett," he said awkwardly, "I owe you an apology." Maya looked up, surprised. Reynolds had been one of her most vocal critics, never missing an opportunity to question her place in the training program. "For what, Sergeant? For underestimating you. For assuming that because you were..." He struggled for words. "Different from what I expected. You couldn't possibly know what you were talking about." Maya accepted Reynolds' apology with a simple nod. "I never wanted special treatment, Sergeant. Just the opportunity to contribute based on my experience." "That's the thing," Reynolds said, lowering his voice. "Word's getting around about your background. Mosul, the Distinguished Service Cross, the LRRP operations. Why didn't you ever mention any of it?" She gathered her notes, considering her. Response: "Because respect earned through reputation is temporary. Respect earned through demonstrated ability lasts." As Maya walked away, she felt a strange sense of liberation. For months, she had hidden her background, submerged her expertise, and accepted the dismissal of her colleagues as the price of escaping her past. Now that past was in the open, and rather than feeling exposed, she felt authentic for the first time since arriving at Fort Carson. The following morning, Maya found Captain Matthews waiting at the entrance to the training grounds, his expression unusually serious. "Walk with me, Bennett," he said, gesturing toward a secluded path that circled the perimeter of the base. Once they were alone, Matthews handed her a classified folder. "This just came in from Division Intelligence. The mercenary unit that attacked. Our trainees. They're part of something bigger than we initially thought." Maya opened the folder to find surveillance photos, intelligence reports, and threat assessments that painted a disturbing picture. The mercenaries were connected to a sophisticated terrorist network with operations throughout the region. More concerning, they had specifically targeted Fort Carson because of its role in preparing special operations personnel for deployment to counter their activities overseas. "They're planning something else," Matthews said quietly. "Something bigger. Division believes they'll attempt another strike before the security measures we've implemented are fully operational." Maya studied the intelligence assessments with practiced eyes, recognizing patterns that others might miss. These aren't random attacks. They're systematically targeting our training infrastructure to degrade our operational capabilities before a major offensive. "That's the assessment," Matthews agreed. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Maya looked up from the file. "We prepare, and we turn their strategy against them." Over the next 48 hours, Maya worked with a small team of trusted personnel to implement a plan that was both audacious and calculated. Rather than simply hardening the base's defenses and waiting for the next attack, they would create a controlled opportunity, a scenario that would appear to be a vulnerability, but would actually be a carefully prepared trap. "It's risky," Colonel James Harrison, the base commander, objected during the planning session. "Deliberately creating what appears to be a security gap could backfire catastrophically if our assessment of their capabilities is wrong." "With respect, sir," Maya countered, "conventional defensive postures are precisely what they're expecting. Professional operators adapt to predictable security measures. What they won't anticipate is a target that fights back on their terms." The colonel studied Maya carefully. "Captain Matthews speaks very highly of your tactical acumen, Staff Sergeant. He also mentioned your background is considerably more extensive than your personnel file suggests." "Yes, sir. This plan of yours requires precise execution, perfect timing, and the element of surprise. If any component fails, we could be looking at significant casualties." Maya met his gaze steadily. "Every operation carries risk, sir. The question is whether the potential reward justifies that risk." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, weighing the options. Finally, he nodded. "Proceed, Staff Sergeant. But I want hourly updates and a complete abort protocol in place if anything deviates from your projections." "Understood, sir." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Intelligence suggested that the mercenary unit's next target would be a high-value training exercise scheduled for the eastern sector of the Besa, combined arms operation involving both regular infantry and special operations candidates. Rather than canceling the exercise or surrounding it with obvious security, they would proceed as planned, but with subtle modifications. The training group would appear to be standard trainees, but would actually include experienced combat veterans integrated seamlessly into the formation. The routine perimeter patrols would maintain their predictable patterns, but additional security teams would be positioned in concealed locations throughout the area. And most importantly, Maya herself would establish an overwatch position that provided clear fields of fire across all likely infiltration routes. "You're putting yourself in the most exposed position," Matthews noted as they reviewed the final operational plan. "If they detect your presence before initiating their attack, you'll be their first target." "That's the point," Maya replied. "They'll be looking for conventional security measures, patrols, checkpoints, surveillance. They won't be expecting a single operator in an advanced overwatch position." The night before the operation, Maya found herself unable to sleep. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, not just for the success of the mission, but for the lives of every person involved. If her assessment was wrong, if the mercenaries didn't attack as predicted, or if they detected the trap before it was sprung, good soldiers could die. She stepped outside her quarters, looking up at the stars that spread across the Colorado sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. The same stars she had used for navigation during countless operations in hostile territory. The same stars that had witnessed both her greatest triumphs and darkest moments. "Can't sleep?" Maya turned to find Private Mendez approaching, a mug of coffee in each hand. He offered one to her, which she accepted gratefully. "Pre-mission jitters," she admitted. "Never goes away, no matter how many operations you run." Mendez nodded, though his experience paled in comparison to hers. "Staff Sergeant, can I ask you something personal?" "Depends on the question." "After Mosul, after everything you went through there, how did you find the courage to keep going? To pick up a rifle again when the time came?" Maya considered the question, looking back up at the stars. "It wasn't courage, Mendez. It was clarity." "Clarity?" "When those trainees were pinned down, when lives were in immediate danger, everything else fell away. All the doubt, all the hesitation, all the fear, none of it mattered anymore. What remained was simply what needed to be done." She took a sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through her chest. That's the thing about moments of crisis. They strip away everything superficial and leave only what's essential. And sometimes, what's essential is the very thing you've been running from. Mendez was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. "Tomorrow, when this all goes down, do you think it will work?" Maya smiled slightly. "Intelligence is never perfect, Mendez. Plans rarely survive first contact intact. But we've prepared as thoroughly as possible, anticipated contingencies, and positioned our best assets optimally. The rest is up to fate and skill. And if they don't attack as expected, then we'll have conducted a very realistic training exercise and we'll reassess our intelligence. Either way, we'll be better prepared for whatever comes next." As dawn broke over Fort Carson, Maya was already in position on a rocky outcropping that overlooked the eastern training grounds. Her ghillie suit blended perfectly with the surrounding vegetation, making her virtually invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for a concealed sniper. The M110 rifle was positioned on a stable platform, its advanced scope giving her clear visibility across the entire operational area. Through her communications earpiece, she could hear the various security teams checking in as they took their positions. The training exercise was scheduled to begin at 0800 hours, and intelligence suggested that any attack would likely occur during the initial phase, when the trainees would be most exposed. At 0745, Captain Matthews' voice came through her earpiece. "All elements in position. Exercise commencing in 15 minutes. Any sign of hostile activity?" "Negative," Maya responded quietly. "Area appears clear, but visibility is limited in sectors 3 and 4 due to terrain features." "Understood." Maintain overwatch and report any changes immediately. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Maya scanned the operational area methodically, her trained eyes searching for any sign of infiltration or unusual movement. The training group had assembled at the staging area, going through their pre-exercise checks with practiced efficiency. To the untrained eye, they appeared to be standard trainees, but Maya knew that nearly half of them were experienced combat veterans prepared for the possibility of real hostile contact. At 0757, just 3 minutes before the exercise was scheduled to begin, Maya noticed a slight movement in the tree line, approximately 600 meters from the training group's position. It was almost imperceptible, a subtle shift that most observers would attribute to the morning breeze. But Maya recognized it immediately as the movement of a camouflaged operator adjusting position. Possible contact, Sector 2, tree line. Adjacent to the eastern approach, range 600 meters, she reported quietly. Can you confirm hostile intent? Matthews responded, negative, maintaining observation. Maya adjusted her scope slightly, focusing on the area where she had detected movement. For several long seconds, nothing changed. Then, as the training group began moving toward their first objective, she caught another flicker of movement, this time the unmistakable profile of a rifle being raised into firing position. Confirmed hostile, eastern tree line, preparing to engage, Maya reported, her voice calm despite the surge of adrenaline. Multiple additional signatures detected. Estimate at least 8 operators in concealed positions. All units, implement contingency alpha, Matthews ordered over the command channel. Training group, take defensive positions. Security teams, stand by for coordinated response. The training group, hearing the code phrase through their own communications, immediately shifted from training posture to combat readiness. The veterans among them guided the actual trainees to covered positions while establishing a defensive perimeter. The hidden security teams remained concealed, waiting for the hostiles to fully commit to their attack before revealing their presence. Maya kept her scope focused on the lead hostile, the one who appeared to be directing the others with hand signals. He was well concealed behind natural cover, presenting a difficult target at this range, but she had a clear shot if authorized. To engage. Command, this is Overwatch. I have clear shot on what appears to be hostile force leader. Request permission to engage. There was a brief pause before Matthews responded. Overwatch, hold fire, let them initiate. We need confirmation of hostile intent for the record. Maya acknowledged the order, continuing to track the lead hostile through her scope. The mercenaries were disciplined, patient, waiting for the optimal moment to launch their attack. It was the hallmark of professional operators, the restraint to wait for perfect conditions rather than rushing into action. At 0812, the hostile force finally made their move. Multiple positions opened fire simultaneously, creating a well-coordinated crossfire aimed at the training group's position. The trainees, already in defensive positions, immediately returned fire, creating the impression of a standard unit caught by surprise, but responding with basic combat training. Hostiles have engaged, Maya reported. Multiple firing positions, coordinated fire patterns. Definitely professional operators. Security teams, execute containment protocol, Matthews ordered. Overwatch, you are cleared to engage. Priority targets are command elements and heavy weapons. Maya didn't hesitate. Her first shot struck. The lead hostile center mass, eliminating him instantly. Her second and third shots neutralized 2 operators who were manning what appeared to be a light machine gun position. Each shot was precise, calculated, delivered with the mechanical efficiency that had made her one of the most effective operators in the LRRP program. The hidden security teams emerged from their concealed positions, creating a synchronized response that caught the mercenaries in a devastating crossfire. What had been intended as an ambush against vulnerable trainees had become a carefully orchestrated trap that left the hostile force outmaneuvered and outgunned. Maya continued providing precision fire from her overwatch position, systematically eliminating hostile operators who attempted to establish new firing positions or coordinate a withdrawal. Her marksmanship was flawless: 8 shots, 8 confirmed. Eliminations, all at ranges that would challenge even experienced military snipers. Within 12 minutes of the initial engagement, the remaining mercenaries attempted to withdraw, only to find their escape routes cut off by additional security teams that had been positioned specifically for this contingency. Faced with overwhelming force and the loss of their command structure, they surrendered. As Maya watched the security team secure the prisoners and establish a perimeter, she felt a profound sense of completion. The operation had been executed perfectly minimal-friendly. Casualties, complete neutralization of the hostile force, and valuable intelligence assets secured for further analysis. More than that, she had performed her role without hesitation or doubt. The skills she had tried to leave behind had proven to be essential not just to the mission's success, but to the survival of everyone involved. The weight of responsibility that had once seemed unbearable now felt like a natural extension of who she was: a protector, a guardian, someone whose unique abilities could mean the difference between life and death when it mattered most. Maya disassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, packed her equipment, and began making her way back to the command post. By the time she arrived, the operational area had been secured. Medical personnel were treating the few minor injuries sustained during the engagement, and intelligence officers were already processing the captured mercenaries. Colonel Harrison met her at the entrance to the command center, his expression a mixture of relief and newfound respect. "Staff Sergeant Bennett," he said formally. "Exceptional work out there. Your assessment of the threat and operational plan were spot on. Thank you, sir. The entire team performed admirably. Preliminary interrogation of the prisoners confirms your analysis. They were targeting our special operations training infrastructure as part of a larger campaign. The intelligence we've gathered should help us disrupt their broader network." Maya nodded, but her mind was already moving beyond this single operation to the larger implications. If one mercenary unit had targeted Fort Carson, others might be targeting similar facilities elsewhere. The threat wasn't eliminated. It was merely contained temporarily. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to coordinate with Division Intelligence to analyze patterns across other training facilities. This may be part of a synchronized effort targeting multiple locations." Harrison studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Granted. And Bennett, I'm initiating paperwork to have your actual service record reinstated. No more hiding your expertise under administrative classifications." Maya hesitated. For years, she had used those administrative classifications as a shield, a way to distance herself from the responsibilities and expectations that came with her true background. The thought of stepping fully back into that identity, with all its implications, was both liberating and terrifying. "Is that going to be a problem, Staff Sergeant?" Harrison asked, noting her hesitation. Maya straightened her posture, making a decision that had been forming in her mind since the moment she had picked up a rifle to save 30 young soldiers 3 days earlier. "No, sir, no problem at all." As she walked through the command center, Maya noticed something different in how people responded to her. It wasn't just respect. It was a particular kind of recognition that came only from witnessing someone perform at the absolute peak of their abilities under extreme pressure. The security teams who had participated in the operation nodded to her with a newfound appreciation. The intelligence officers who were processing the information from the captured mercenaries sought her input on details that others might miss. Even Staff Sergeant Reynolds, who had apologized for underestimating her just days earlier, now approached her with questions about advanced tactical positioning that he would never have considered asking before. Captain Matthews found her reviewing the after-action reports in a quiet corner of the operations room. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sitting down across from her. Maya looked up from the reports. "Fine, sir. Just analyzing what we could have done better." 8 perfect shots at ranges between 600 and 850 meters, in variable wind conditions, against moving targets with 0 collateral damage, Matthews said quietly. "I'm not sure better is a meaningful standard in this context." "There's always room for improvement," Maya replied. The security team in Sector 4 was delayed in their response by approximately 40 seconds. The communications protocol had redundancies that actually created confusion during the initial engagement. And my position, while effective, had limited visibility in Sectors 3 and 4. Matthews smiled slightly. "You never stop analyzing, do you? It's how I stayed alive through 4 years of operations that should have been fatal, sir. And it's why you're exactly where you need to be right now." Matthews slid a folder across the table to her. "Colonel Harrison approved this 10 minutes ago. Effective immediately." Maya opened the folder to find orders reassigning her from basic training support to lead instructor for the Advanced Tactical Operations Corsa specialized program that prepared elite soldiers for high-risk missions in hostile territory. It was a position typically reserved for officers with extensive combat experience and proven leadership abilities. "Sir, this is exactly what this program needs." Matthews interrupted. "Someone who understands the reality of modern combat operations. Someone who can prepare these soldiers for what they'll actually face, not what the training manual says they should face." Maya studied the orders, feeling the weight of the responsibility they represented. This wasn't just about returning to her true expertise. It was about shaping the next generation of operators who would face threats even more complex than those she had encountered. "The course starts in 2 weeks," Matthews continued. "You'll have complete authority to redesign the curriculum based on your experience and the intelligence we've gathered from recent operations." "What about my current assignment?" "Already handled. Reynolds will take over your basic training responsibilities." He specifically requested it, actually. Said something about wanting to learn how to see things the way you do. Maya closed the folder, making another decision that felt both inevitable and right. "I'll need to requisition specialized equipment for the course. The standard training gear won't adequately prepare these soldiers for the scenarios they'll encounter." Matthews nodded. "Already approved. Whatever you need to make this program as realistic and effective as possible." As he stood to leave, Matthews paused. "You know, Bennett, when you first arrived here, I thought you were just another administrative transfer, someone who couldn't handle the real demands of combat operations. I've never been so glad to be wrong in my entire career." After he left, Maya sat alone with the orders, contemplating the path that had brought her to this moment. From the elite operator who had survived Mosul, to the training assistant hiding from her past, to the precision marksman who had saved 30 lives with impossible shots, and now to the instructor who would shape the future of special operations. Training, the journey hadn't been linear or easy. It had been filled with doubt, pain, and the constant temptation to retreat from her true capabilities rather than embrace them. But sitting here now, with a clear purpose and the opportunity to transform her hardest experiences into life-saving knowledge for others, she felt a sense of alignment that had been missing for years. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from avoiding our past, but from integrating it fully into who we are becoming. Maya's path forward was clear, now not a return to who she had been before Mosul, but an evolution into something more complete. A warrior who understood both the technical precision of combat and the human cost of conflict. As she gathered the orders and stood to leave, Maya caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window-straight posture. Clear eyes, the quiet confidence of someone who had finally stopped running from her own excellence. The woman who had been told she would break under fire, had not only withstood the flames, but had emerged from them tempered, stronger, and more purposeful than before. The real test was still to come, training a new generation of operators who would face threats even she couldn't fully anticipate. But for the first time since Mosul, Maya Bennett was ready to face that challenge, not by hiding her light, but by allowing it to shine at its fullest intensity. 2 weeks later, the dawn sky was just beginning to lighten as Maya stood before the first class of the redesigned Advanced Tactical Operations course. 24 soldiers, a mixture of experienced operators and promising newcomers, stood at attention on the training field, their expressions a combination of anticipation and uncertainty. They had heard rumors about the new instructor and the changes to the program, but none of them truly understood what they were about to experience. At ease, Maya called, her voice carrying across the field with natural authority. As the soldiers shifted their stance, she studied their faces, reading their backgrounds and the way they carried themselves, the vigilance in their eyes, the subtle indicators of experience or its absence. My name is Staff Sergeant Maya Bennett. For the next 8 weeks, I will be transforming how you think about tactical operations, survival in hostile territory, and the reality of modern combat. She paced slowly before them, making eye contact with each soldier in turn. Some of you have combat experience. Some of you have only training simulations. By the end of this course, all of you will understand the difference between what the field manuals teach and what actually keeps you alive when everything goes wrong. A tall soldier near the center of the formation shifted slightly, a subtle indication of skepticism that Maya immediately recognized. Staff Sergeant Eric Donovan, 3 tours in Afghanistan, conventional infantry experience, recently selected for special operations training. His file indicated exceptional physical abilities, but rigid adherence to standard doctrine. Something to add, Sergeant Donovan? Maya asked, stopping directly in front of him. Surprise flickered across his face at being singled out. No, Staff Sergeant. You're wondering what a woman your size could possibly teach you about combat operations that you haven't already learned in 3 tours overseas, Maya said calmly. You're wondering if this course is going to be another checkbox exercise in political correctness rather than practical tactical training. Donovan's posture stiffened, but he remained silent. Those questions are natural, Maya continued, addressing the entire group again. So let me be clear about what this course is and isn't. This isn't about meeting quotas or checking boxes. This is about preparing you for scenarios that have killed good soldiers who thought they were ready. She gestured toward the challenging terrain that surrounded the training area. Everything you'll learn here comes from real-world operations, kind that don't make it into official reports or training manuals. The kind where survival depends on perfect execution under impossible conditions. Maya paused, letting her words sink in. 4 weeks ago, 30 trainees on this base were attacked by professional mercenaries during what should have been a routine exercise. They survived because of specialized skills that aren't taught in standard courses. She didn't mention her own role in that incident. The details remained classified, known only to those directly involved and the senior command staff. By the time you complete this course, you'll have those skills. Not in theory, not in controlled simulations. In practical application, under conditions as close to actual combat as we can safely create. Maya pointed to the eastern hills where the sun was just beginning to illuminate the rugged landscape. Your first exercise begins now. 5 miles full gear, across variable terrain, with simulated hostile contact at unpredictable intervals. This isn't a physical fitness test, it's a tactical movement assessment. I'll be evaluating not how fast you move, but how effectively you use terrain, maintain situational awareness, and adapt to changing threat levels. She checked her watch. You have 4 hours to reach the objective at Ridgeline Delta. Work as a unit or as individuals, your choice, but understand that your decisions will have consequences. Questions? A young specialist raised her hand. Staff Sergeant, what are the parameters for simulated hostile contact? Unknown, Maya replied. Just like in actual combat operations, you won't receive prior notification of enemy capabilities, positions, or intentions. You'll need to identify threats, assess appropriate responses, and execute effective countermeasures with the information and resources available in the moment. She surveyed the group once more. Remember this, in real combat situations, the difference between life and death isn't usually about who has more firepower or better physical conditioning. It's about who observes more accurately, who adapts more quickly, and who makes better decisions under pressure. Maya checked her watch again. Your exercise begins now. Good luck. As the soldiers moved out, Maya watched their initial formations and movement patterns with an experienced eye. Some immediately fell into conventional tactical formations, predictable, by-the-book approaches that would work against undisciplined opponents, but would be fatally flawed against professional adversaries. Others showed more creativity, using terrain features for concealment and varying their patterns to avoid establishing predictable rhythms. Captain Matthews appeared at her side, observing the soldiers as they disappeared into the training area. Interesting approach. Most instructors would start with classroom theory before field exercises. Theory creates intellectual understanding, Maya replied. But combat creates visceral knowledge. I want them to experience failure in a controlled environment before I explain why they failed. It creates receptivity to new approaches that might contradict what they've been taught previously. And the simulated hostile contact? Maya smiled slightly. Sergeant Reynolds and his team are positioned throughout the course with simulation rounds and varying levels of resistance. The soldiers don't know it yet, but they're facing opponents who have studied their likely tactical responses and prepared countermeasures specifically designed to exploit standard doctrine. You're setting them up to fail, Matthews observed. I'm setting them up to learn, Maya corrected. There's a difference. 4 hours later, Maya stood at Ridgeline Delta as the training group staggered in, exhausted, covered in the bright markers of simulation rounds, and visibly frustrated by an exercise that had challenged everything they thought they knew about tactical movement. Only 3 of the 24 soldiers had made it through without being killed by the opposition force. The rest had fallen, victim to ambushes, sniper positions, and counter tactics specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses in standard operating procedures. Specialist Sarah Chun, one of the 3 who had successfully completed the course, had abandoned conventional movement patterns entirely, using micro-terrain features for concealment and taking routes that seemed inefficient on paper but provided superior protection from observation and fire. Gather around, Maya called as the last of the soldiers arrived. Despite their exhaustion and frustration, she noted how they formed a tight circle, already bonding through shared challenge exactly as she had intended. What went wrong out there? She asked simply. The opposition knew our playbook, Donovan admitted reluctantly. They anticipated standard tactical movements and had countermeasures in place before we even began. Exactly, Maya nodded. In today's combat environments, you're increasingly facing adversaries who have studied our doctrine, who understand our standard responses, and who have developed specific countermeasures to exploit the predictability that comes from rigid adherence to established protocols. She turned to Chun. Specialist, what approach did you take that allowed you to complete the course without being eliminated? Chun straightened despite her fatigue. I abandoned conventional movement patterns, Staff Sergeant. Instead of focusing on the most direct or defensible route, I prioritized remaining unpredictable and minimizing my visible signature. And where did you learn that approach? My grandfather was a guerrilla fighter against the Japanese occupation in China, Chun said quietly. He taught me that when facing a superior force, invisibility is more important than speed or strength. Maya nodded appreciatively. Your grandfather's wisdom just saved your life in a training scenario. Imagine what it could do in an actual combat situation. She addressed the entire group again. This course isn't about discarding everything you've learned previously. It's about understanding when standard doctrine serves you and when it becomes a liability. It's about developing the judgment to know the difference and the adaptability to create new approaches when necessary. Maya pointed to the setting sun that cast long shadows across the training area. Tomorrow morning, we'll analyze exactly what happened today where the opposition force was positioned, how they anticipated your movements, and what alternatives would have been more effective. Tonight, I want you to reflect on one question. Are you willing to abandon what you think you know in order to learn what you need to survive? Over the following weeks, Maya systematically deconstructed and rebuilt how her students approached tactical operations. She pushed them beyond conventional doctrine, beyond physical limitations, beyond what they believed possible, not through arbitrary hardship, but through carefully designed scenarios that replicated the actual challenges they would face in modern combat environments. Each day combined intense physical training, tactical problem-solving, and practical application of advanced techniques. Maya taught them how to observe terrain, not just for immediate tactical advantage, but for long-term strategic positioning. She showed them how to recognize patterns in enemy behavior that revealed vulnerabilities. She trained them in precision marksmanship under conditions that most instructors would consider impossible for effective shooting. More than the technical skills, however, Maya focused on developing their judgment, the ability to assess situations accurately, adapt to changing conditions instantaneously, and make life or death decisions with incomplete information. This wasn't something that could be taught through lectures or manuals. It had to be forged through experience. Combat is chaos, she explained during a night exercise in week 4. The difference between operators who survive and those who don't isn't just skill or equipment, it's the ability to find clarity in that chaos, to make good decisions when everything is going wrong. The training scenarios grew increasingly complex and realistic. Maya brought in elements that most programs never addressed: the psychological impact of extended operations in hostile territory, the cognitive effects of sleep deprivation and sustained stress, the emotional challenges of making life or death decisions with imperfect information. By the 6th week, even Donovan, who had been the most skeptical initially, had become one of her strongest supporters. After successfully completing a particularly challenging night infiltration exercise, he approached Maya while the team was preparing their equipment for the next day. "Staff Sergeant," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Maya continued, checking her gear. "For what, Sergeant?" "For underestimating you. For assuming that your methods were theoretical rather than practical." He hesitated, then added, "And for thinking that your gender had any relevance to your capabilities as an instructor." Maya looked up, studying his face. "Apology accepted. But understand something, Donovan, this isn't about me proving anything to you or anyone else. It's about preparing you for realities that most training programs pretend don't exist. I get that now," he nodded. "The stuff you're teaching us, it's not in any field manual I've ever seen. Because field manuals are written by committees, reviewed by bureaucrats, and designed to scale across hundreds of thousands of soldiers with varying capabilities," Maya explained. "What I'm teaching you comes from operations where failure wasn't an option, where adaptability wasn't a buzzword, but a survival requirement." Donovan hesitated, then asked the question that had been circulating among the trainees for weeks. "Mosul, that was you, wasn't it? The LRRP extraction that went sideways? The 18-hour standoff?" Maya was quiet for a long moment. "What happened in Mosul is classified, Sergeant." "Yes, Staff Sergeant," Donovan nodded, understanding the non-answer for what it was confirmation without official acknowledgement. "What matters isn't what I did there," Maya continued, "but what you learn here. Every technique, every tactical approach, Every psychological tool I'm teaching you has been tested in actual combat conditions. The ones that failed died with the operators who tried them. The ones that work, those are what you're learning." As Maya walked away, she reflected on how much had changed in the 2 months since she had picked up a rifle to save 30 trainees from professional mercenaries. The woman who had hidden her expertise, who had accepted dismissal rather than assert her value, who had tried to escape her past instead of integrating it, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone who had finally reconciled the warrior she had been with the leader she was becoming. The nightmares of Mosul hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had transformed from a burden of guilt to a source of wisdom that might save the lives of the soldiers under her guidance. The final week of the course brought the most challenging scenario, yet a comprehensive exercise that combined all the elements the trainees had been learning separately. The mission required infiltration into hostile territory, precision marksmanship against multiple targets at extreme ranges, coordinated tactical movement under observation, and extraction while under direct fire. This scenario replicates conditions that have defeated conventional forces in multiple theaters of operation, Maya explained during the pre-mission briefing. Your objective is simple but not easy. Infiltrate to the target area, eliminate the simulated high-value targets with precision fire, and extract without casualties. The training area had been transformed into a hyper-realistic simulation of a hostile urban environment. Opposition forces played by experienced operators from other units had been given significant advantages in numbers, positioning, and intelligence about the trainees' capabilities. You'll be operating with limited support, minimal equipment, and no direct communication with command once you cross the line of departure, Maya continued. Success depends entirely on your ability to apply what you've learned over the past 7 weeks. As the trainees prepared their equipment and reviewed their approach, Maya watched with quiet pride. The transformation was remarkable, not just in their technical skills, but in how they thought about tactical problems, how they communicated with each other, how they adapted to changing conditions without needing direct instruction. "Captain." Matthews joined her as the trainees moved toward their starting positions. "They're ready," he observed. "I've never seen a class progress this far in such a short time." "They've always had the potential," Maya replied. "They just needed someone who understood what they were truly capable of achieving, and someone who knew how to push them past their perceived limitations without breaking them," Matthews added. "That's the real art of instruction, Bennett, knowing exactly how far to push each individual." Maya nodded, thinking about her own journey from broken to rebuilt, from hiding to leading. Sometimes people need to be reminded of their own strength. Sometimes they need to discover capabilities they never knew they possessed. The exercise began at dawn, with the trainees infiltrating the simulated hostile territory using the advanced movement techniques Maya had taught them. From her observation position, she could see them applying everything they had learned using micro-terrain for concealment, maintaining unpredictable patterns, communicating through subtle signals that wouldn't alert the opposition to their presence. They encountered the first serious resistance at the urban perimeter, a carefully planned ambush that would have decimated a conventionally trained unit. Instead of following standard counter-ambush protocols, they implemented the adaptive response techniques Maya had developed during her own operations. Within minutes, they had neutralized the threat and continued toward their objective with minimal delay. The precision marksmanship phase presented even greater challenges, multiple targets at ranges between 600 and 800 meters, with variable wind conditions and limited shooting positions. 2 months earlier, none of them would have attempted such shots. Today, they executed them with confidence and precision, applying the advanced ballistic calculations and shooting techniques Maya had drilled into them relentlessly. The extraction phase brought the greatest test, a coordinated assault by superior numbers designed to overwhelm them through sheer force. Again, The trainees abandoned conventional responses in favor of asymmetric tactics that negated the opposition's advantages. Instead of attempting to match firepower, they created confusion through unpredictable movement, selective engagement, and tactical deception. By the time the exercise concluded, the training staff watching from the command center were shaking, their heads in amazement. What should have been an impossible scenario had been completed with 0 simulated casualties and perfect mission execution. "That's not just good," Colonel Harrison murmured as he watched the after-action footage. "That's exceptional. That's the kind of performance we typically only see from operators with years of actual combat experience." Maya stood at the back of the room, allowing the trainees to receive the recognition they had earned. This wasn't about her methods or her background. It was about what these soldiers had achieved through their own dedication and willingness to embrace approaches that challenged everything they thought they knew. Later that evening, as the trainees celebrated the successful completion of the course, Maya found herself standing alone on the observation point overlooking the training grounds. The sun was setting, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber, the same colors that had filled the sky the morning she had made the impossible shots that saved 30 lives. "Quite a view," a voice said behind her. Maya turned to find Specialist Chun approaching, carrying 2 bottles of water. She offered one to Maya, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. "It helps with perspective," Maya replied, looking back out over the terrain. "Reminds you that most of the obstacles we think are insurmountable are actually quite small in the greater scheme of things." Chun was quiet for a moment, gathering her courage. "Staff Sergeant, before the course ends tomorrow, I wanted to thank you." "For what, Specialist?" "For showing us what's possible. Not just the tactical skills, but—" Chun struggled to find the right words. "For showing us that sometimes the qualities others see as weaknesses can actually be your greatest strengths." Maya turned to look at the young soldier, barely 22, small in stature like Maya herself, but with an intelligence and adaptability that had allowed her to outperform many of her physically stronger peers throughout the course. "What do you mean?" "When I joined the Army, everyone told me I was too small, too quiet, too analytical to succeed in combat operations," Chen explained. "They said I'd break under fire, that I'd freeze when it mattered most." Maya nodded, understanding all too. "Well, then I watched you," Chun continued. "I saw how you turned those same qualities into advantages, how being smaller meant moving more quietly, how being analytical meant seeing patterns others missed, how being underestimated meant having the element of surprise. And what did you learn from that?" Maya asked. Chun straightened, her expression resolute. "That the voice that matters most is the one inside your own head. That other people's limitations aren't your limitations. That sometimes the person everyone expects to break under fire is actually the one who stays calm when everyone else is falling apart." Maya smiled, hearing her own journey reflected in the young soldier's words. "That's the most important lesson I could teach you, Chun. Not the marksmanship or the tactics, but the understanding that true strength comes from embracing who you actually are, not who others think you should be." As they stood watching the final light fade from the sky, Maya felt a sense of completion that had eluded her since Mosul. The circle had closed from the operator, who had survived impossible odds, to the instructor who had hidden her light, to the leader who had embraced her true capabilities and used them to forge a new generation of exceptional soldiers. Tomorrow, these 24 operators would return to their units, carrying with them not just the technical skills she had taught them, but a deeper understanding of their own capabilities. They would face challenges that no training program could fully simulate, make decisions that would determine whether missions succeeded or failed, whether people lived or died. But they would face those challenges with something that couldn't be measured in qualification scores or physical fitness tests. The unshakable confidence that comes from discovering capabilities you never knew you possessed, from being pushed beyond what you thought possible and discovering that your limits were largely self-imposed. As darkness settled over Fort Carson, Maya Bennett, the woman they said would break under fire, who had instead saved 30 soldiers with one perfect shot and gone on to transform how an entire generation of operators would approach combat, looked up at the stars and felt at peace with both her past and her future. Some journeys aren't about reaching a destination, but about becoming who you were always meant to be. For Maya, that journey had led her right back to the heart of who she truly was, not just a warrior, not just an instructor, but a guardian of those who would face the chaos of combat and needed every advantage she could give them. In the end, it wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself that the fire hadn't broken her. It had forged her into something stronger, more resilient, and infinitely more valuable than she had ever imagined possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.